Hey everyone, we're all stressed, we all have tension, but the one thing that alleviates those feelings for me is to be creative. Today's video is to share my process of going from a ball of porcelain clay to a ceramic planter. I create these planters both for my own plant collection, as well as occasionally I have sales on my Instagram. This isn't so much of a how-to video, but a video to inspire you to be creative in whatever form that you like. Every one of my creations begins with a simple bowl of water. I primarily create my planters on a pottery wheel that I purchased through Craigslist a few years ago. I'll grab a piece of clay and form it into a rough sphere to get ready for the whole process. So one of the more important things in wheel throwing is centering your clay. I do this by applying both vertical and horizontal pressure at full speed. Eventually, I end up with what I would kind of call a giant clay hockey puck. And here is really where the fun begins. I plunge down the middle and I create the general shape of the planter. I form the floor of the planter and I compress the base. I'll begin pulling up the walls of my planter, making them thinner and taller with each pass. I also have to make sure that I don't make the wall so thin that it collapses, because remember, there is both gravity pushing down on the piece, and there's also centrifugal forces being applied that kind of pull apart the walls. Muscle memory also really starts to take over as you become more experienced with this process. You learn quickly that you cannot force the clay beyond what it can handle. Try to make the walls too thin and it will collapse. Try to speed up the drying process and it will crack. And if you fire it before it's fully dry, it will literally explode in the kiln as steam builds up inside the walls of the clay. The process of creating ceramics is really to work with the medium, not against it. The clay will always win. Generally, I tell others to guide the clay gently with strength and stability, otherwise you risk kind of over manipulating the clay itself. I allow these fresh pots to dry slowly over the next few days by wrapping them delicately until they arrive at a state called leather hard. There are a lot of weird terms used in ceramics, but leather hard is an important one. It's a state where the clay has partially dried, but not fully. Generally, it has the feeling of, you guessed it, leather. You can easily trim and handle the pot without deforming it. Any drier, and it will produce dust when you trim it, any wetter and you really can't handle it. While throwing on the wheel creates the general shape of your pot, the trimming process is really what hones and refines your shape. This is an opportunity to create the foot of the pot, which allows it to appear elevated when displayed and also helps with rocking. I also use this opportunity to create a drainage hole, which is, of course, a vital part of any planter. I'm often asked how and why I got into pottery making. My professional life is a graphic designer, and I found myself being connected with the computer more and more, and I really wanted to do something creative that was away from the computer. Ceramics was a really great match for me. I enrolled in a wheel throwing night class at my local art school in Austin. Once a week for summer, I would drive out to the school, spend some time attempting to create planters, and these were all just for my succulents and my cacti. Trimming also has the benefit of lowering the weight of your pot, as well as make the walls thinner than what you might be able to throw. Once finished, I'll allow this piece to dry slowly for several days until it comes to a state called bone dry. You'll know this is the case when the greenware no longer feels cool to the touch, and that's because there's no more moisture in it. One final touch is to stamp my brand into the foot. And now we have an unfired ceramic called greenware. Now that the piece is dry, it is now ready for the first of 2 firings. At this stage, you can stack together all your greenware or unfired ceramics in your kiln, one on top of the other. There's no risk of them adhering to each other because they have not been glazed yet. Enjoy your heat bath, my babies. The purpose of this first firing at around 1950 degrees is to remove all remnants of moisture from the clay. The temperature used will depend on the clay that you use. As moisture escapes, the clay particles tighten together, resulting in a smaller but a stronger piece. This is called bisqueware. After a quick sponge bath, I am now ready to glaze. Ceramic glaze, in its most basic form, is a layer of glass applied to a ceramic object. Know that a ceramic glaze is a mixture of a glass former, usually silica, a frit, which is something that lowers the melting point of a glass former, a stabilizer, which makes sure the glass doesn't melt off your piece, and colorants mixed in water. I prefer dipping my pieces into glaze because it allows for the quickest and cleanest application. The bisqueware will absorb the water quickly in seconds, leaving the powdery glaze applied to the ceramic. In addition to dipping, glaze can also be applied directly with a brush. In most cases, you'll want to add a CMC gum to a dipping glaze if you want to apply it with a brush. It's an additive that slows the drying process, but this one works fine without it, which is convenient because I also use it as a dipping glaze. One last firing at a much higher temperature of around 2200 degrees. This higher temperature allows for glass and the ceramic to become vitrified or impermeable. After 12 hours of cooling, 12 impatient hours of cooling, let me remind you, the kiln is ready to open and reveal the hardware. And now we have color. I live for this excitement of opening the kiln. The result of hard work and creativity, all starting from a simple ball of clay. It is important for each of us to find our passions and really what makes us creative in life. Each of us has unique talents and interests, and I really believe that we must pursue them. What makes you creative? What do you love making? And most importantly, what inspires you to be creative? I'd love to know, so put that in the comments below. Please be sure to leave me a comment, hit that like button, and subscribe if you enjoyed today's episode. I'll be filming a lot more gardening content in the next few weeks, so be sure to look out for that in the future. Until then, stay creative, and I'll see you in the next one.